U.S. forces stunned the Philippines with massive nighttime offload of new military equipment. Under the dense, humid skies of Manila Bay, a strange silence preceded the storm. Fishermen returning from a long night at sea were the first to notice it. Enormous silhouettes cutting through the mist, slow but deliberate, their shapes cloaked by darkness. It wasn't until the sound of hydraulic ramps slamming against metal echoed across the still waters that reality set in. An operation of unprecedented scale had just begun. Giant U.S. C-17 Globemaster III transports hovered above like silent phantoms, circling in tactical formation, while below, naval cargo ships anchored under heavy guard. Floodlights pierced the night, briefly illuminating the coastline as if day had suddenly arrived. Containers the size of small buildings were lowered onto barges with robotic precision. To onlookers, it felt less like a supply mission, and more like the opening act of something far more calculated. Local media scrambled to capture the unfolding scene, but military police restricted access with unusual severity. Even seasoned reporters who had covered years of joint U.S.-Philippines exercises whispered that something about this night was different, colder, sharper, as though the choreography belonged not to training, but to the opening page of an operation still unnamed. A message written in steel. What startled many was not the presence of U.S. forces. That was nothing new. The Philippines has long played host to American troops under the Visiting Forces Agreement. What sent ripples across the bay that night was the scale and secrecy. Eyewitnesses described crates stenciled with markings they had never seen before, codes beginning with XR21 and Hyper Vi. Some containers, guarded by personnel in full combat gear, were rushed onto armored trucks that vanished into convoys headed inland, headlights blacked out, engines low. Military analysts speculated from afar, trying to decipher the puzzle. Was this cutting-edge drone technology? Advanced missile defense systems? Or something even more unsettling? Prototypes of weapons not yet acknowledged in any public arsenal. The Philippine government remained tight-lipped, issuing only a vague statement that joint defense cooperation was proceeding according to established agreements. But the ordinary citizens watching from rooftops and shoreline cafes felt the truth in their bones. This was no routine maneuver. This was a statement, loud and unignorable, painted across the waters of Manila Bay in the language of power. Whispers of a new front. What could drive such a sudden display of force? In the weeks leading up to the operation, tensions in the South China Sea had escalated. Unmarked vessels, suspected of belonging to Chinese maritime militia, had harassed Filipino fishermen near disputed reefs. Rumors swirled of laser incidents targeting Coast Guard ships, and one report claimed a near collision between a Philippine patrol boat and an unidentified nuclear submarine. Against this backdrop, the offloading of U.S. military equipment took on a far darker meaning. It was not just preparation, it was deterrence. A reminder to allies and rivals alike that the United States was willing to raise the stakes dramatically. But some whispered that this was more than deterrence. The precision of the deployment, the level of classification, and the eerie efficiency suggested that the U.S. was not simply reacting. They were preparing for something anticipated, something imminent. The human reaction crowds gathered at vantage points along the bay, straining to catch glimpses through binoculars and smartphone lenses. Social media exploded with blurry clips of containers glowing under floodlights, soldiers barking orders in clipped tones, and armored vehicles rolling inland in eerie silence. In the barrios of Manila, rumors spread faster than facts. Some believed the equipment was designed to counter an imminent missile threat. Others whispered of alien technology, recovered and hidden under the guise of military secrecy. The older generation, recalling darker times of martial law and foreign interventions, worried that the Philippines was becoming once again the pawn in a game too vast to control. Meanwhile, in quiet offices far from the shoreline, Philippine officials debated what they had truly agreed to. Had the Americans disclosed the full scope of their plans? Or were the islands now playing host to tools of war that could ignite a conflict rather than prevent it? A clock ticking unseen. As dawn broke, the ships vanished as quickly as they had arrived. By mid-morning, the bay looked deceptively normal again, as if the night's events had been nothing more than a fever dream. Yet the skyline bore subtle traces. Tire marks carved into roads, sand still scattered where heavy machinery had passed. The echo of engines still lingering in the ears of those who had listened too closely. The equipment, whatever it was, had already disappeared inland, swallowed by secure bases and sealed hangars. The true nature of the operation remained a mystery, its details classified far above the reach of public inquiry. But one truth lingered, undeniable and unsettling. Something had shifted in the balance of the Pacific. The Philippines had become the stage for an operation that seemed less like a routine alliance and more like the first move in a game whose rules had yet to be revealed. What exactly was delivered that night? Was it merely advanced defense systems? Or the seeds of a confrontation still hidden beneath layers of secrecy? As questions multiplied, one thing was certain. The world would not have to wait long for answers. Because in the shadows of the South China Sea, forces were already moving, watching, waiting, preparing. Shadows in motion. 2 nights after the mysterious offload in Manila Bay, whispers spread across military outposts from Palawan to Luzon. Villagers near remote highways spoke of convoys moving silently under cover of darkness, escorted by unmarked vehicles with tinted windows. Some swore they saw drones hovering overhead, silent, triangular silhouettes that did not blink or hum like ordinary machines. By dawn, the traces vanished, roads swept clean. No tire marks, no footprints, only the unease remained. Inside a heavily fortified hangar, somewhere deep within Luzon's mountains, the containers labeled XR-21 and Hyper-V were opened under strict clearance. Technicians in white suits worked without speaking, their faces obscured by tinted visors. Each crate revealed objects that seemed less like conventional weaponry and more like fragments of the future. Sleek, aerodynamic shells, cylinders glowing faintly blue, control panels with symbols not entirely recognizable. A few of the Filipino officers present exchanged uneasy glances. One muttered, This is not what we signed up for." But no answers came, only silence, and the hiss of pressurized locks releasing. The rumor spiral. On social media, the narrative fractured into chaos. Some claimed the US had deployed laser-based defense grids capable of disabling satellites. Others insisted it was hypersonic strike technology far beyond anything publicly admitted. Conspiracy forums went further. Reverse-engineered crafts from Roswell. One post read, quickly deleted but shared thousands of times before disappearing. The Philippine government repeated its line, joint defense activities under existing agreements. But no press release could erase the images of glowing crates, strange markings, and the feeling that a hidden clock was now ticking. A message to Beijing satellite imagery confirmed what analysts suspected. Chinese reconnaissance drones had circled above Manila Bay during the offload. They had seen everything, or almost everything. Within days, Chinese naval vessels increased their presence near Scarborough Shoal. Fishing boats armed with radar arrays swarmed disputed reefs. Chinese state media broadcast warnings veiled as diplomacy. Any external interference in regional affairs will be met with decisive measures. But beneath the official statements, something else stirred: urgency. For the first time in years, Beijing seemed caught off guard. Inside the Pentagon, in Washington, D.C., a secure briefing unfolded. A general pointed at satellite maps glowing on the wall. The offload was a success. Phase 1 complete. Equipment is secured inland. Phase 2 will depend on the response. A civilian official leaned forward, voice low. And if Beijing escalates? Silence filled the room. The answer came not in words, but in the icy stare of men and women who knew that escalation was no longer a matter of if, but when. The human pulse. In Manila, ordinary people felt the tension in the air. Restaurants near the bay were quieter. Fishermen avoided certain waters. Students whispered in classrooms about the night the ships came. An old man sitting near Roxas Boulevard said softly to a reporter, "We've seen this before. When powers move their pieces, the small nations are the board, and boards break." His words spread online, quoted, shared, dissected. They became a kind of grim prophecy. Dawn of the unseen. At exactly 2:17 a.m., 3 days after the offload, a new sound split the night sky. Not jets, not helicopters, something else. Witnesses described it as a low, vibrating hum, like the ground itself was resonating. Then, in the distance, streaks of light arced upward, fast, precise, vanishing into the clouds before anyone could grasp their origin. The next morning, no official acknowledged the event. No video remained online longer than minutes before being flagged and erased. But those who heard it knew. The equipment was not dormant anymore. It was active. What were the XR-21 and Hyper-V really for? Why did they activate in secrecy, without warning? And how long until the world saw their first demonstration? Not in exercises, but in conflict. The countdown had begun. A curtain pulled back. The world awoke uneasy. In the Philippines, whispers filled coffee shops and markets. In Beijing, satellite intelligence poured in faster than it could be analyzed. And in Washington, a classified report was stamped with a single word: imminent. The mysterious designations, XR-21 and Hyper-V, were no longer dormant codes locked in crates. They were operational. And their first display had not been lost on the Chinese frigate that nearly sank beneath a wall of water. But still, questions burned. What were they capable of? Why now? And why here in the heart of the South China Sea? The South China Sea, a powder keg. Within days, Chinese warships multiplied across the disputed waters, their silhouettes dark against the horizon. Carrier strike groups maneuvered near contested reefs, their aircraft circling like hawks. Filipino fishermen were driven further from their traditional grounds, their small wooden boats dwarfed by massive steel hulls. Tensions rose, not with words but with presence. Every vessel, every patrol, a move in a game of brinkmanship. And yet, above them all, unseen to ordinary eyes, the triangular craft that had left Luzon lingered silently, cloaked in the night sky, watching, waiting. Inside the hangar, Luzon Highlands. Camera, a cavernous room bathed in cold blue light. Engineers work without pause, surrounded by weapons that defied conventional classification. Lead technician, whispering to a colleague. We weren't told this would be deployed outside simulations. Colleague. Because this isn't deployment, it's escalation. At the far end of the hangar, the Hyper-V modules pulsed faintly, each orb-like structure radiating an eerie glow. They weren't simply weapons, they were systems, designed to rewrite the rules of warfare. A message sent, a warning ignored. In Washington, a communique was drafted, carefully worded, urging stability and restraint. In Beijing, the response was colder, sharper. We do not respond to intimidation. The sea does not belong to you. But the truth lingered behind closed doors. China's high command had seen the footage. They had studied the beam. They knew what it meant. The US had unveiled something beyond conventional warfare. And yet, to show weakness was unthinkable, which meant confrontation was inevitable. The night before the clash, on the eve of the standoff in villages near the Philippine coast, families prayed. Soldiers wrote hurried letters they might never send. Fishermen tied their boats, knowing the sea was no longer theirs. The hum returned, faint at first, then louder. The triangular craft moved again, slipping into position. Satellites above the Pacific caught only flickers of their signatures before the images vanished into classified vaults. The spark. At 04:03 a.m., just as dawn brushed the horizon, a Philippine Coast Guard vessel reported being targeted by a high-intensity laser from an unknown Chinese ship. The crew was blinded, electronics fried. 30 minutes later, a Chinese destroyer locked radar onto a US Navy cruiser patrolling nearby. Warnings blared, engines roared, missiles were armed, and then the XR-21 systems awoke.